What's up, everybody? I am super excited. We've got a little different angle coming at you today, which I think is going to be super fun. Usually on my shows, I think all but one I can think of in the last 2 years, and the 700 plus episodes I've done have been more than just me and a guest. So today we have two guests with us, one of which has been on my podcast before, but the episodes haven't dropped yet. They will drop soon, though. And we're going to do a little live stream conversation here with Quinton and Carla Reeves. Carla, you are an executive coach. You coach many different people in the realm of business and things of that nature. Quinton is a relationship marriage coach, which is super interesting. I can't wait to talk about that. And together, I think they've kind of joined forces in that. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you have a thriving marriage yourself and you kind of use that. CarlaReeves.com is where you can find them and their extraordinary marriage course. Quinton and Carla, what's up, guys? Ladies, gentlemen.
Mario.
How are you?
Good. How's everything? Yeah, how's everything in your part of the world?
Hot.
I hear you. It is. It's a heat wave right now. Like on top of everything, right? We're getting through the whole COVID thing. Then you have all this, all the political stuff with it being an election year, and now we have the heat wave. It's like things are just driving us inside.
For sure.
That's right.
But let's talk a little bit, because Carla, you've been on the podcast before, so you and I kind of know each other. We've had probably 3 or 4 conversations. We've recorded some good stuff, and it's been super interesting. I love chatting with you. And at the end of our last conversation at the podcast, you said, my husband's a coach too. And I said, really? Tell me more about that. And you said relationships and marriage. And that was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I've talked to a lot of, and I don't want to, not that I think there's like a mold or anything, but mostly in that category, I've talked to a lot of women who are relationship coaches. To see a guy step up and do that is awesome. I think it's something that's well needed. And Quinton, I would just love to hear a little more about your story and what got you into the whole marriage and relationship coaching end of things.
Well, it's this pretty woman next to me. I mean, we met 20 years ago and decided we wanted to create an extraordinary marriage together. We wanted to do something different from the things that we had seen from other people and other couples. And it's been a 20-year journey of finding out what works, what doesn't work, and how we can share that with people so that they can really thrive together.
When you say you wanted to do something different than other people and other couples, can you get a little more specific with that?
Yeah. So, when we first kind of fell in love and, you're going through that bliss, that honeymoon phase, people would say to us, oh, that'll fade in another year. You guys are just in this, honeymoon phase. It'll pass. Just wait. And we're like, what? We don't want it to fade. We don't want it to, we want to live in this world forever. We love each other. We care for each other. We want to feel special every day. So we made a commitment to how can we make this work so that we can thrive all the time? Because we saw couples just struggling. They're married, they've been together, and they kind of dislike each other. They don't hang together. They don't, they kind of complain about each other to their friends, and they're disconnected. And that's not what we wanted to create.
And we didn't know how we were going to do that, right? We sort of figured it out along the way, but it became sort of this pillar that we were always heading towards, was this idea of an extraordinary marriage. And we didn't even know what that meant, but we knew we wanted to do something different.
How did you meet?
We met in Landmark Education, if you're familiar with Landmark. I was the coach in the self-expression and leadership course. She was a participant in that course, but I wasn't her coach, so it was good. But we did a lot of self-development work on ourselves before we met. So we were able to clean up our own space before we met, so that when we came together, we had gotten rid of a lot of our own personal baggage, basically.
But what's crazy is how we actually met is somebody in that course, for whatever reason, she came to each of us separately I was just coming out of a divorce, and I was in a relationship, just dating, and I can't remember if you were in between, I think.
Always in between.
In between relationships. But anyways, for whatever reason, she thought we should meet, and she came up to each of us individually and said, "You two need to meet." And we did, and it wasn't like fireworks went off in that moment, but she planted a seed. And I wish I could find her today, because if it weren't for her, I don't know that we would have ever, sort of come together.
So let's back up just a second, because one of the things I heard you say, Quinton, is that when you guys met, the two of you met, you cleared your spaces. You cleared your spaces and then you met, which I think is something that doesn't quite happen a lot in today's world. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, in today's social media heavy landscape, with Tinder and TikTok and Bumble and all these different places where people are meeting. Like, when I think this is one of the topics I kind of wanted to get into, but you kind of led me there. Like, when I look at my parents, right, high school sweethearts, they just were together ever since they can remember, and that's what you hear about, and that's super common. My aunts and uncles, very similar stories. But in today's world, with technology the way it is, we have so many different options. You can meet people from different states, different countries, talk frequently online. So it's not like you have to meet that special someone in your own backyard. And I think that amount of options also leads us down the road of, when we have a breakup or we have something that's a heartbreak, we can just hop onto an app, and instead of clearing the space, much like you said you did, we fill the space with something else. So we're bringing ourselves from relationship to relationship rather easily without clearing the space. And it's almost like we take all of this baggage with us everywhere we go. And then when we finally say, this is it, let's settle down, there's like a lot of work that needs to be done to make it even digestible. I don't know if is this making sense? I'm just curious on your take of all of this.
It is true. And in order to create an extraordinary marriage, you have to clean up your own mess. That's what it takes to have an extraordinary marriage. A lot of couples, when they're struggling, it's always, I wish if they would only change, then everything would be great. If my wife would just do X, Y, and Z better, everything would be fine. And that's not the way it works. You've got to clean up your own mess in order to then generate and create something special.
So let's say that you do that, right? Let's say that you take the time, you invest in yourself, you're in a good place, and you're ready to start a relationship. So you go out and look. And maybe, Carla, you can answer this one as well. I want to hear from both of you, from both perspectives, both sides of it. You go out there, you're ready to do it. How do you find, or how do you assess whether your partner is also in that same place?
You mean having sort of cleared their own space?
Correct.
I think it happens in conversation. I mean, lots of conversation, right?
We talk a lot. I mean, even when we were dating, we said, man, do we talk too much? We really explore. You have to be willing to be vulnerable and ask questions and actually share yourself. That's, a lot of, like you're talking about with the social media today, people hide their true selves through these apps and social media. So it's scary for people in today's world to really just be themselves. And that's the key. You just have to be willing to be yourself and have those conversations.
And I think it really comes down to, you can be looking over there to see what they're doing, but I think ultimately you have to be responsible and show up to the relationship the way that you hope somebody else is going to show up. And I think you're going to know. One of the things that we did when we first started dating was we literally said to each other, we don't want to play the games that everybody else plays. If you want to see me again, tell me. And if we don't have to wait 3 days to call each other, or, we threw out all the rules to really create something different. And we've been doing that for around everything in our life for, 20 years, but just really not complying to the norms of society. Because I think if you do that, you're going to end up with the norms around marriage and relationship.
What are some other rules that you've broken that you saw that people were doing and you're like, let's do this differently? I like
So
different.
yeah, so we literally kind of laid out some ground rules of how we were going to relate to one another. So, for instance, if I have a complaint with her, rule one is if I have a complaint, I bring it to her. I don't complain to my buddies, out at the bar on Saturday night. Same for her. That she says, she'll get with her girlfriends and they're all complaining about their husbands. And the rule is you don't complain. If you got a complaint, you bring it to me. So.
Well, and I may have complaints inside, but not sharing those and not just perpetuating those, like, keeps a lot of integrity here between us. And one, it doesn't taint, other people in my life. It doesn't taint their view of him. So there's just a lot of respect around how I'm going to speak about him to others. And as a woman, sometimes that would make me feel very left out in a group of women and girls, because that's sometimes how we bond, is by talking about life and complaining. And a lot of times I felt very left out, but it was that bigger commitment to our marriage that really had me step back from that.
Communication is key. I want to say hi to Deb. Deb's on almost all of our live streams, and she just said hello and signed on. So I want to make sure and acknowledge Deb. She usually asks really great questions, so we may see some pop up here in a second. But the other thing I wanted to ask is, as far as like communication goes and progressing in the relationship, when you first started dating, was marriage something you openly talked about from the very beginning, or did it come up as you grew the relationship?
I think it came up as we went, but inside I knew day one I would marry her.
How did you know that?
For me, it was that way. I would have married her on our first date. That's how it felt for me on our first date.
Was that a feeling or an assessment? Like, how did you know? Did you just know, or did you think about it and was like, yeah, I think I would?
For me at the time, it felt like meeting an old friend that I hadn't seen in a long time, and for a first date, it was a bizarre feeling. It's like almost like I've known this person for a long time and I haven't seen them in a long time, but I really had just met her. So that for me was that feeling.
What'd you do for your first date?
We did the typical. We went to a movie and a dinner and
Toy Story.
Yeah. But after the dinner, it was kind of like I said, I don't want to go home. And she's like, I don't want to go home either. Like, okay, well, let's find somewhere else to go, so we just kept the date going, We went
to a bar and had a drink and hung out for hours. I mean, I think we just talked for hours and hours and we didn't want to leave.
This isn't still the first date, is it? You guys eventually went and then got back together, right?
What's that?
I said, this isn't still the first date, is it? You guys eventually went your separate ways and then came back together, right? Okay. Yeah. Just checking. No, but that's a great story. I like that. I like that. It's super interesting when you just, you click that fast and that easily. Now, Carla, did you have the same experience on that first date?
I did. I had the same experience of, and I never had this experience of like, oh my gosh, I don't want to leave this person. Like there was like this feeling of, I haven't seen you in a long time and I don't want to leave. But I had been through divorce and I was super afraid and super scared. So I had lots of resistance, and he had a really strong stand and gave me a lot of space to kind of freak out a little bit. I had kind of multiple freakouts, but there was something deeper that I always knew it was right. I was just afraid, and I had to kind of work through that.
Quinton, when you first started dating, did you know, well, obviously you knew that she was married in the past, you went through that divorce. Was that something that you consciously took into account and said, I'm going to have to, honor this in some way, or would that just come natural to you?
Yeah, I just had a bigger commitment stand. I really didn't let those circumstances influence me. I knew what felt right. And so it didn't have to be pushed. It didn't have to be manipulated. I could just let her be whatever she needed to be, and enjoy whatever ride I was on with her.
That's good. And so you go on this first date, you don't want to leave, you extend it out. It's fantastic. When was the second date?
I don't think it was too long after.
Probably the next weekend. It wasn't it wasn't long, but I mean, at that point it just kind of,
I think we talked.
Yeah, it just kept going. And you know, I think I proposed what, 9 months later. So
Okay.
yeah.
When was the first fight?
Gosh, I don't even know if I remember. That's a long time ago, Mario. Do you remember?
I don't really know, but a few months in, I think 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
It might have been my birthday.
Something about your birthday she got upset about something. And
now let me ask you this: when you have a quote unquote fight or disagreement or whatever, is it usually a civil, let's sit down and talk it out and agree to disagree in some form or fashion if we don't come to an agreement, or can it get heated?
No, we're not. Well,
we have
we're not
heated
like
moments.
Loud and we don't yell and that kind of stuff. We're more quiet fighters, but it can get pretty
intense,
quiet and intense.
One of the things when you're asking about some of the rules that we made, one of the rules that we created from the very beginning was no jabs. And what that means for us, do you know when you're having a discussion with people and you say something that you know is almost like a dagger sticking them? It's a comment or a I call it a jab. You know it hurts them. That's a rule number one. And if you say a jab, even if you don't intend to, the other person has the right to call you out and say, time out. That's a jab. That's not allowed. Because those things, we see a lot of couples who throughout it's almost like a daily jab, kind of like fighting, but they stick each other. And I'm going to poke because I know I'm hurting you. It's just my way of, and eventually you get too many holes. If that makes sense.
Do you think that today's culture, today's marriage culture, do you think people give up too soon? Do you think they jab too much and then give up too soon? Or do you think, because it's a lot different today than it was even 30, 40 years ago with, divorce rates. I think divorce has become like a normal thing, and not that it's a bad thing. I mean, some marriages, they need to end. They should have never probably started in the first place. But I see a lot of people who are married like 6 months, 8 months, a year, and then it's like just said and done. Do you think that there are some people that, for the most part, because of today's how easy it is on social media that we talked about and all of those things, that just they don't try to rectify it as hard as they maybe would in the past?
I think so. I think it's our, how shall I say, the generation today hasn't been given the tools to persevere. And it's kind of like the story, like when you go to the gym, people sign up to go to the gym and they're going to get in shape. And what do they call it? The valley of disappointment. You don't see results and you don't lose the weight right away. And so a couple months down the road, I'm not going to go to the gym anymore. That's the way they approach their marriage. They don't realize that when you said, I'm going to love you forever, I'm going to love you forever. Through the thick and thin means I'm going to do it through the thick and the thin. And when they don't get the immediate results of, the fairy tale or whatever it is that they have created in their mind, I'm going to move on. It's too easy to get another relationship and make that seem special. And that'll be special for 6 months. And then it'll, go down the same path. So
Carla, I'd love to hear your take on this. As someone who's gone through divorce, I'm not going to ask you for the specifics of that or why that even have that doesn't that's it's not something you need to disclose. But what are your takes on that when you see couples divorcing a lot easier, divorcing a lot faster? You see people signing prenups as a regular thing. Not that it's good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just a part of today's culture. What's your opinion?
Well, I mean, just my own story is, I thought you just, you fall in love and it sort of takes care of itself. And that clearly wasn't the case. And I think it's what he said. It's about having tools. We by no means, like, we're not perfect people and we don't have a perfect marriage, but we have some really incredible tools that allow us to really cultivate thriving in our lives, and we have a desire to, like, we spend a lot of time at home and together, and for a lot of people, that's the last place they want to be. And, making a commitment to, like, let's create a space where we both get to thrive. And I think for a lot of people, marriage is a battle. And it's like, am I getting what I want? And, not want, like, a power struggle. And I think if you can shift that mindset and really look at, like, how can we actually get our hands on tools that can really help us to create something amazing. And, I once read that, marriage isn't designed to make you happy. It's designed to make you holy. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. I think if we set out for marriage to make us happy and we're kind of looking over there at our partner to fulfill that there's a whole nother approach that's a lot of work, but far more fulfilling.
I'm glad you brought that up because I do also believe that there is a very holy aspect to matrimony in and of itself. I mean, dating is dating, and that's trying to find. There's a reason why there's that dating period, right? And you try to find that one person that you make that commitment to. And it really is, it's not just yeah, we'll try to see if this works type of commitment. When you make those vows, it's vows in front of God. And that, who God, right? I think it was Jesus in the Bible that said, whoever God's brought together, let no man tear apart, something to that effect. And I think that makes it a serious thing. And I think that, with what and I say this to say that what you're doing is sorely needed. It's something that I think people need to look at if their marriage, it doesn't mean they have a bad marriage. Maybe it's just not as fulfilling as they desire it to be. And I think that, coming to someone like you is a big step and something that it shouldn't be something to be ashamed of or nervous about or scared of or anything like that. It should be something that helps make it what they desire it to be.
Well, and I love what you said, because I think a lot of people don't even know what's possible inside of marriage. We look around and there's a lot of people just existing inside of marriage. Marriage is kind of mediocre, and you kind of look over there and you're like, oh, well, maybe mine isn't so bad because that's what they're doing too. And something that I'm really passionate about and we're really passionate about is really showing people that marriage can be amazing and that you can literally fall in love again and again and again. And, it's all about having tools to do that it can be extraordinary.
Do you think a lot of from the people you've worked with, people you've talked to, do you think people understand the seriousness of marriage? And do you think that a lot of people go that far and make that commitment because it's like a social norm? Or do you think people enter into it knowing this is serious, this is like a life commitment, a life partner, and this is something I actually want to commit myself to?
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I think they do it because they think, well, this is just what you do. You grow up, you go through school, you get married, you have kids. That's just the way it rolls. And so they don't really give any intentional thought to it. And that's why you see the people 6 months down the road, they're like, what do I do now? I just thought this is what you did. And so this, you mean I got to work at this? This sucks.
This isn't what I signed up for.
Like this person's not making me happy and they're not doing this. And and everybody else, my friends, my best friend and their wife, they fight all the time. So I guess this is just the way it goes. And so
you get resigned.
They just think, why didn't, and that's why you see a lot of people who are not getting married. They're like, well, if all these people are miserable, why do I want to join that club? And it's because they don't know how to shift their mindset. They don't know that there's anything different. They don't know what they don't know. So it's hard to break out of that bubble or that box to envision that you can create something intentional.
When you're working with someone, do you typically work with couples together, or do you work with one of the two and then?
But
what's your process?
So when I do couples, though, it's separate. So it's coaching the husband on one day and the wife on another day. But you don't share what one couple. It's private, so that the spouse can feel free to share whatever is truly there for them, because there might be things that they don't feel like they can speak clearly to. If they're both there at the same time, you're not a mediator. And so really what I try to accomplish when I'm working with a husband, I'm working with how he can clean himself, how he can control his own. The only thing that he can control is his mind and his own thoughts and actions. He can't control his spouse, and the same for her. She can't control him. She can only work with herself. So how do you adjust yourself to come into the marriage and you can both get what you need?
What's the number one thing you see from working with couples that, typically needs to be addressed? Is there a common thread that you see that keeps popping up time and time again?
Go ahead. No, you have one?
No, you go first.
We're probably going to be the same one.
Ready, say it on 3. 1, 2. I'm just
I think most people just wish that their spouse would change.
Mm-hmm. Like if they would just do this different or do this better, my life would be better.
So they would have changed the other person instead of changing.
Yeah. Gotcha. So the biggest complaint is and most of the time it's because couples are attracted to something that's opposite. I'm a man, she's a woman, though it's an opposite. I have a more laid back personality. She's a more energetic kind of keep it rolling personality. And so couples get attracted to the opposite. All right. That's the main deal. But after 6 months, that opposite energy they want the other spouse to take on their energy. Well, I want her to relax more. Well, I want him to be more energetic or whatever it is. And they start to resent that quality that they were attracted to.
Yeah.
So keeping on that theme with energy and how what you're attracted to and stuff, talk to me a little bit about love languages, because this is something that was brought up to me. My girlfriend actually started talking to me about this. I'm like, I know what they are, but and this is just me. I know what they are, but I've never really paid much attention to them. I'm just more of an in the moment type of person, going by my feel. I'm an empath, so I kind of can play in the moment pretty well. But she was very interested in love language, so we spent some time talking about that, and I learned more about that than I probably care to learn about it at the moment. But I'm just super interested to hear what your take is on learning, identifying your own love language, identifying the other person's, and working together to kind of speak those languages together.
Yeah. I think that the 5 love languages is a great tool for understanding yourself and understanding someone else. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's really the premise is that we give love the way that we like to receive it. And so a lot of times we may feel like we're loving our partner, but we're loving them in our language. And so their love tank may be empty, even though I feel like I'm doing all these things. His love tank is empty. So he's physical touch, and I'm words of affirmation and quality time. And so, he told me once long years ago, like, if you're going to walk by me, like, don't walk by without, like, touching me.
I don't care if it's my elbow or, anything. Just, I need to.
Like, he needs that touch. And like, for me, wasn't natural at all, but learning to do that was essential, honestly, for our marriage, and vice versa. Him learning to send me little notes or write me letters, or that kind of thing, it's been a great tool, I think, for us.
Is that something that's part of your process, Quinton?
It's not, but I do ask people if they've read the book and if they know their own love language, because it's just a great way of understanding that the way you're communicating, the other person may not be receiving it the way you think that they are. And how you can then look at yourself so that you know how to adapt your own way. I know that when Carla gets ready and we're going to go have dinner, she likes to be told whether she looks good or looks nice or pretty, or her hair's done. So, it took moments to, I've got to remember, put this little check mark when I see her, that I need to let her know, because I think she looks beautiful every day. So it didn't come to my mind that I needed to express it. So it, knowing that I needed to express that makes all the difference in the world. And it's those little things that go a long ways. And so if you know what your spouse likes or appreciates, it's easy to give that.
Do you think that's an overarching problem with guys? Just the overall taking time to express things?
You'd be surprised at I would say no, actually, because you'd be surprised at how much men want the same things as women. They want that connection. They have a lot of emotion inside of them, even though you don't see it on the outside. In private, men want that same love and connection that women show on the outside.
Carla, you were going to say something before I butted in there. I want to give you.
I don't remember. I got lost in what we were talking about now.
You're thinking about him telling you how beautiful you are.
No, I was thinking about what you just said, and that kind of leads into intimacy, really. And what you're talking about is, men wanting it looks like men want sex, but I think what you've discovered is really they want deeper connection and intimacy. And that's could be a whole nother episode that we do together, Mario. But that's just a whole nother area to explore. Making that part of your life fulfilling together too.
I mean, that's a big part of the equation, right? Is, intimacy, because once intimacy's gone from a relationship, or if you let it go, it's super hard to get back.
Yeah, and that's the differentiator, right, between a marriage and just a roommate.
For sure. So do you want to talk about it for a few minutes and talk about, how are there some things that you've seen when you work with people? How do you keep that spark, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like the doorway to intimacy, or one of the doorways, is communication. And I think what happens is people, when you first meet and you just talk about everything, right? You share every little thing, you talk about everything. And then somewhere along the way that starts to change, and you stop communicating about things, and you start sort of closing down things. And if you notice at the same time, maybe you stop kissing, or maybe you stop this, and it starts slipping, that shutting down of communication starts to seep into your physical intimacy. And then eventually people aren't having sex, and they're sleeping in separate bedrooms. And so I think communication is one of the first places that you can notice it shutting down. And if you want more intimacy, you want to open that up. What would you say?
Totally. I agree 100%. And so, but it's making yourself aware. I think people get lost in the day-to-day and are not conscious of their being with their spouse. They're not present to what's really going on, and that's what keeps them from making that change.
One of the things that we've learned to do to keep our connection alive, right, is and this sounds kind of weird for people, but really checking in with each other, to make sure that our connection is clear and strong. Because what we've discovered over a lot of missteps and doing things wrong and making messes is that when our connection is clear and strong, everything in our life works better. Everything. And so we are constantly, kind of checking in, are we good?
Are you good?
Are we good? If something is off, we address it almost immediately. We call it sweeping, but it's just like you have to sweep your house, you have to sweep your marriage and keep that foundation clean. And when you do, you keep that connection strong and alive, and that's where magic is.
Mario, one of the things that happens and why we check in is, have you ever, you're having conversations with your girlfriend, or let's say you're at a party with friends, and, you tell a joke or you say something that goes awry. You think it's good and fun and something happened, but your spouse might have got offended or hurt feelings, or, something got awry in the communication. And the next day, your spouse is not quite the same. They're maybe not as loving. They're not. So those are the things that we check in with on a periodic basis, so that they have the opportunity to say, hey, last night, you were saying this, and, that hurt my feelings, or whatever took place. And then you can clean up that mess. Hey, that's not the way I intended that to go. That's not what I meant when I said this, or, oh, I'm sorry, maybe you need to apologize, whatever it is that you have to clean up, so that then can rebuild the connection. Because those little moments that take place, if you don't clean them, it's like electrical wires. The more dirt and dust that accumulates on it, before you know it, there's no electricity flowing anymore. And so that's when everybody starts to split. They can't see why they're together anymore. Because they've let too much dirt of those little bitty microscopic things get in the way.
I'm going to ask you just a real simple question that leads into another question here, kind of staying on the same path of what we've been talking about. But I'd like each of you to answer this if you don't mind, and then I'll give my answer as well. How do you define love?
So I got that for me. It's loving. I'm going to love you for everything that you are and everything that you're not. If you can love the things that they are not, that's when you actually have the whole picture. Because most people, well, I love this quality about you, I love that quality about you, but this I don't love. If you can begin to love those qualities that makes them different, that's when you can bring everything together.
I was going to say, I think love is a choice, right? And it kind of goes with what he's saying. He's really a master at what he just said. He's really has been so good at loving all the parts of me. I haven't always been so good at that. He's really taught me to do that. I think, at first it was there were parts that I wanted to manage or control, or tuck in some parts of him that maybe made me uncomfortable, or maybe had me want to, manage perceptions of what other people would think of him or us. And I've really had to learn over the years to make space for all that he is and all that he isn't. And that's been just such a growing process. I was actually on a coaching call today talking to a client about this. But really making space for all of your spouse, because if you think about it, sometimes we get so fixated or focused on those things that maybe we don't like or that we want to change. But that's just, if you made a list of all the qualities of your spouse, those things that annoy you or bug you, they're just one item on the whole list of things. And sometimes we can make that one item sort of dominate, like this is all of who he is, when it's not. And if we can really see it like that's just one part of this whole incredible being, and how can I make space for this whole entire person? And I think that's been a really, just such a growth edge for me, and like just a really rewarding part to just evolve in our marriage.
Those are great answers. I love that. And I was just curious and I love the fact that both of them are other focused, because that's really when it comes down to love, that's what it's all about. And I think my favorite definition of love comes from Thomas Aquinas. And he said it's willing the good of the other for the other's sake. So regardless of what happens to you, it's willing good for that other person, or no matter what. And I think the reason I asked that question is because I knew your answers would be other focused. And I wanted to ask, when it comes to intimacy, I think there's a lot of attention. I want to hear your take. I'd love to hear it. I think there's a lot of attention on what I get out of it, like how it makes me feel and how it works for me. But I think that when we get to a place where we become more other focused and taking care of the other person for that other person's sake, even in the midst, especially in the midst of intimacy, then we get more out of it by default.
That's true.
You take that.
That's true. The sexual intimacy in a marriage, over time, if people aren't careful, becomes a very selfish endeavor. And the search for that selfish endeavor brings about stress and tension in a marriage. And that's why you end up seeing so many couples, separate bedrooms, never making love anymore. That search actually removes love and doesn't create love. And that's one of the things where hopefully we'll talk again. We've really changed our mindset around what it means to make love, physical intimacy, and the way we approach it, and has revolutionized our marriage, revolutionized our day. It overflows into the way we work, the way we view each other, the way our kids are. It's one of the most dynamic things in a marriage. And for me, it's the complete definition of marriage. It's the one relationship. If you look at all your different love relationships, whether it's brotherly love, your siblings, the way you love your parents, the way you love your best friend, the way you love your spouse, is through that sexual intimacy. It's what makes that relationship different than every other relationship you have.
And I want to say something that may be a little controversial to some people, but that's fine. I'm going to say it anyway. And I want to hear your take on this as well. And feel free, both of you, to chime in. To the intimacy side of things, what you just said, how that is how it differentiates from all of your other relationships. I also believe that in today's culture, in today's day and age, that the ease in which we become intimate, or I don't want to say become intimate, do intimate acts with other people more freely, kind of takes away from the specialness of that experience when you participate in it with someone that you actually share love with. I think that, today's culture and the ease in which we just jump in and do it, or try the quote today from what I hear from young people saying is, what's your body count, and things like that, which I think is just like, I don't know. I think it's a little bit, makes me a little uneasy, to be honest, to see people just going in and doing that, because it's not about love. It's about how it makes me feel. But doing that so often, doing it so freely, when you do finally commit to someone, it kind of makes that act, and that, I don't want to say consummation, but that's what they used to say in the old days, right? You consummate the marriage. It makes it less special and less intimate.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I want you to go first.
Well, I just was seeing two different things when you were talking, that there's really sex, and then there's something really sacred that occurs and is possible inside of marriage. and about really making love. Like, we think of that as sex, but it's, if you just look at the words of like make love, like it is really about making and growing love. And that's what we've really shifted the way that we make love so that it actually is that. And so I think they're two very different things, but for sure, some of that can be very damaging. And we talked about baggage when we first started, right? That you bring into the next relationship. Yeah.
That creates a lot of baggage too. But back to your point about kind of the society today, I don't think what you said is controversial at all. But if you look at most of the time what society tries to promote, the media, the social construct of what's happening, they 90% of the time have it wrong in every aspect. And so they are telling people today, you should have more sex, you should have more passion, you should have more new toys, new experiences, all these things that lead you in the wrong direction. And that's one of the things that I think people eventually it gets to the point where they realize that it's an empty shell, that there is something more. And I think that's what we're hoping to help people find, is that there is another avenue and another path, and you can have it with your spouse and really take the time to generate it.
And to just comment on what you said, I think, and now as I was listening to both of you, I think what kept coming up in my mind is that intimacy should be a byproduct that comes from, but simultaneously adds to the love in a relationship, not the foundation on which we'll try to figure out how to love each other because we like to do these things together.
Yeah, the doing is the byproduct, if that makes sense. The intimacy, if you can shift the balance instead of coming in for the doing, if you can shift the doing in a different, put that in the back, and the intimacy in the front, that's actually creates a more harmonious experience.
Yeah, and we could get really philosophical with this, but I won't go there. When you talk about like what is the nature of sex and what is what is it for and how, because, and the only reason I bring that up is when you violate the nature of something, like what it's intended for, what it's created for, what its purpose is, you can get some negative consequences. And that goes with anything. I mean, you can violate the nature of a table, or you can violate the nature of a stove, or you can violate the nature of a human being, or you can violate the nature of sex. And I think that, this culture that we've just been talking about, a lot of that is violating the nature of sex and what it is actually, the act, what it is for, what its purpose is, and what couples who are in a loving married relationship can create from it. And I think that has a lot to do with it too, is that, again, that gets a little philosophical, but going against the real nature of it. Same thing with marriage, right? Marriage is there for a reason. When we go against the nature of marriage and we do all these different things and try these different things and try to play by our own rules, it gets tough.
It is. And I love where you're going, because that's the realm that I like to deal with. And one of the things I'm going to kind of go back to marriage, but if you really look at the definition of what it is that you are marrying, it is you are uniting and acknowledging. All cultures do it. It's an acknowledgement of the sexual union between a man and a woman. Every culture around the world since the beginning of time has something that they recognize is unique. And it is that marrying of those two energies or spirits. That's why, you mentioned the Bible before. It's the two become one flesh. You are acknowledging that sacred, natural entity. And that's really what we have tried to shift.
And I love that, because I was listening to a sermon about, marriage and love it at one point. This was actually a few months ago. And what was said was that, that commitment, whether you say yes to marriage and the I do's to that commitment in front of God, or you say yes to religious life, and want to be single, whatever that yes is that you give, it supersedes all other yeses in the future. So once you say I do and you marry someone, then every yes that comes after that or life decision you have to make together and take on together, because you've already said yes to each other, and that supersedes everything else. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to hear, but not only hear, but need to internalize and act as if, because you're not two people just living together, right? When you say yes and you make that commitment, as you said, you're now one flesh. So every decision affects both of you, and it should be kind of both of you as one of you.
Yeah. And that's why I think for us, what we've discovered and, help show people is that if we take care of this relationship and we put that as the priority, everything else falls into place after that. So if you put your focus on creating this as the most thriving aspect, the way you go to work, the way you deal with your children, the way you deal with your friends, it all cascades after this.
Now, since COVID's hit and people have been on lockdown, I'm sure you've been working with people over the past few months. Have you noticed both sides of things? Like with some people, when they're forced in together, everything's fine. They get along better. They love being around each other and everything flourishes. And then some people, when they get together, they're like, I never thought I'd have to spend this much time with you, even though we're married. And now things are getting out of hand or getting crazy or getting difficult or challenging. Have you seen both sides of those things?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Both sides. People super happy and thriving and having, the best time in their marriage and also in their family, just really having a lot of quality time. And then the other extreme of, I think especially even now, because it's been it's been 4 months or whatever, right? And so I call it, getting the microscope out. But what happens sometimes is we put our partner under a microscope. And when you've spent a lot of time together, that is easy to happen. And nobody looks good under a microscope. And so I've been talking about putting the microscope away. Is really healthy for a marriage. It's just, it doesn't feel good to be looking through the microscope, and it doesn't feel good to be under the microscope. So yeah, for sure. Both extremes.
So if you're talking to someone right now who's maybe watching this or listening to this on the podcast, and they're like, yeah, I can't wait till this is over. I just need to get out and get away from this person for a while or whatever. What do you tell them to help them reconcile that and maybe even, make their relationship better? Because when we say yes to that someone and we make that commitment, we should want to be with them as much as possible, because we are one at that point, right?
We are, but we are individuals as well. So we definitely both need our space. I mean, there are times when I need my own space, and the way in which you handle that makes a big difference. I may come home some days and I say, look, I just need to go into my cave. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to be interrupted. I just need to veg out and clean my space. So as long as I communicate that, it's letting her know, look, I'm not upset with you. I don't have anything. There's nothing wrong. I just need my own time. And it's really just about communicating what you need. If sometimes she'll say, I just need to go have coffee with my best friend and we just girl talk and chit chat and, go. That's, you need that to fuel your own tank, because if you don't have your tank full, you can't then give to your spouse. So don't make yourself wrong for wanting some space, but make sure that you're communicating it properly so that they know, hey, this isn't about you. It's not about anything. I just need to regenerate myself.
Back to communication.
Yeah.
That's
always
so important. Yeah. And
Sure.
so to those people who are in that situation, what would you say to them if they're like, I can't take it anymore. And it just get some, sit down and communicate better and have a conversation and take some time for yourself when needed? Or what would your advice be?
When I have a client show up with like a challenge of any kind, right? It's like they're focused on what they don't want, right? And so like, oh, like I'm going crazy. So you're focused on going crazy. You're focused on not having any space. You're focused on like, I can't spend one more day in this household. And so when we sort of just look at like, where is your focus? And then I ask them like, what would feel a little bit better? What is it that you want? And if they can articulate like, you know what, I want a little bit of space, or I just need some time to myself, or then we look at what's within your control to create that or to move closer to that. Because I think a lot of times, especially now, it's just a focus problem. And if you can shift your focus to what you do want and start putting your energy to moving in that direction, you'll feel a little bit liberated in some way.
I think for me, I think we had this conversation before, but I might come home and I might be stressed out. I have a lot of things on my mind, and that's why I want to go into my cave. But the moment I express that I don't want anybody around, 5 minutes later, I'm like, where is everybody? It releases almost that feeling. It gives me the freedom to now come back into the space and truly be together again, which is kind of odd.
Yeah.
It's that paradox.
Yeah. Once you let it go and let it be free, then there's nothing to resist against. Before you're kind of guarding yourself, or you're guarding my own time. I want my own space. You're guarding all these things. And the moment you just express what's so, now when you have the freedom and the space, you're like, oh, well, I don't really need it as much as I thought I did.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I've seen that before. And, it's a balance, right? And I don't really like to use that word balance, just because it's one of those words. Like, remember when you're a little kid and you say the same word over and over and over again, and then it starts to lose meaning because you said it so many times? There's certain buzzwords out there, and I think right now balance is one of them. Although I think balance is necessary, I just think that it's not as powerful as it once was because of the way it's being strewn about. However, I appreciate both of you being here. This has been a fantastic conversation. I want to give you both the last word. Whatever you want to leave people with, I want to remind people they can find you at carlareeves.com. That's your website. And you have an extraordinary marriage course that is available there that people can grab if they feel like they're a little stir crazy in COVID, or they just want their marriage to be extraordinary. It's kind of based on the things that you've learned from creating this. With the beginning of this conversation, you said how you've done things differently to create an extraordinary marriage. And through this conversation, I've seen it. I've seen the way you look at each other. I've seen your answers and the way that, you just interact. And it's a beautiful thing. I want to commend both of you on not only what you've been able to do together with yourselves, but how you're paying it forward and helping other people, which I think is really where real fulfillment comes from, is taking what we've grown and what we've learned and helping other people in the same manner and really making that ripple effect. So thank you for that. And I want to give you the last word. So whatever you want to leave people with, it's all yours.
I just want to say, if there's something in your heart, in your mind that you just know there's something more possible inside of your relationship, inside of your marriage, follow that. Because for me, that's what it was. It was like, I knew I wanted something more. I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know what it looked like, but I just followed that, knowing that there was something better. And it's just, there's so much possible inside of marriage. It can be amazing. So that's what I want to leave people with.
Yeah, you can totally create anything you want. People think it's a dead end, but there are options and ways to get where both of you can thrive. And that's where we want to take people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared today. Quinton and Carla Reeves, again, I'll throw out carlareeves.com is where people can find you. And let's definitely do this again soon, because I know there's a lot more we could talk about and so many different directions we can go in. So let's definitely plan for that.
You got it. Thank you,
Sounds
Mario.
great. Thanks, Mario.